Are you looking for a guide that'll tell you how to use Hisuian Goodra when it comes to Sword and Shield, BDSP, Pokemon Showdown in general, or whatever metagame you look forward to playing? Well, today you're in luck, because I'm going to go over how to use Hisuian Goodra and what makes it such a good Pokemon. So if you guys enjoy this and want to see more, leave a like below. It's the easiest way and also the best way to support the channel for free. And subscribe if you want to keep up with more videos. That way then you guys don't miss a video when I go over a moveset guide, competitive vid in general, or whatever else you want to see on the channel. With that said, let's start off with Hisuian Goodra's stats and typing. So Hisuian Goodra has the Dragon Steel typing, which is an incredible typing. This is a pretty rare type currently, with the only known user that I can think of offhand being Dialga. So already, you know, an incredible Pokemon for this Pokemon to follow after, especially from Legends Arceus, which had Dialga in it anyway. But what would give you, what would make you use Goodra over Dialga? So one, if you're playing in a OU metagame such as BDSP or Sword and Shield, should this Pokemon come to those, or even just a general OU for whatever the next Gen 9 game is, this is a Pokemon that could actually perform really well against a lot of the metagame, especially with the coverage that it got, which I'll go over that in a little bit. But for now, with the stat line, let's go into the abilities first. We have Sap Sipper, Overcoat, and Gooey. These are all kind of situational abilities, unless you're running Veil, which in that case, Overcoat is probably a must bring in my opinion. But otherwise, Sap Sipper and Gooey really just depend on the matchup. In a counter team setting, you could probably tailor this pretty well. However, sadly in Smogon, you're just going to sort of have to bank off of either switching this in on grass types, which you could do to be fair, or switching this in and trying to maybe make a contact move happen, which you can probably position to be fair, but most of the time that's probably going to be U-turn and knockoff, and especially in U-turn's case, they're not even going to keep the speed drop anyway, because they're just switching right out. With this Pokemon's stats, Goodra ended up having lost 10 HP and 20 speed in order to fund its 30 base higher Fizz Def, which is truthfully an incredible buff for it. One of the worst things about regular Goodra was the low Fizz Def at base 70 for such a bulky Pokemon, but having 80, 100, and 150 Speed Def does give this Pokemon a lot of potential on paper, because sadly with this typing, it does lack a couple key defensive moves that a lot of Steel types have that are really good. These would be moves such as any sort of recovery, Toxic, Stealth Rocks, or any hazards of any kind to be fair. It lacks all of them. So what would you actually use this defensive Steel type for, if not something like a Hazard Lead or just a general Toxic Wall with Protect? Well, glad you asked. The first thing that comes to mind when missing out on so many of those status options is Assault Vest Hisuian Goodra, with the Gooey ability just in case you take a physical hit, with Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Steel Beam, and Flamethrower. Now with this set, I will say, I personally prefer this coverage set because Flamethrower is great for stuff like Ferrothorn and Kartana. You have Ice Beam, which is great for Dragapult, Garchomp, as well as for grass types. And Thunderbolt is really good against a lot of bulky waters, which would be stuff like Tapu Fini, for example, which you're otherwise hitting for neutral Steel Beam, while also taking half your health, I might add. And then Steel Beam is here mostly for the Clef matchup, if nothing else. It's just really good at doing a fuck ton of damage to Clef, considering you have such a high base power Steel move, and sadly this Pokemon does actually lack Flash Cannon, though to be fair, that could easily be accommodated for when it does transfer up to a new gen. But I will say here, you could easily throw on Draco. However, I personally didn't find it as worth it, though if I was to take off anything for Draco, it would probably be Ice Beam, considering Ice Beam still is really good dragon coverage, and you're really only missing out on very specific Pokemon without Ice Beam. However, I think that the Pokemon that you miss out on being Lando T, considering its high usage stat in OUs since it's been introduced, I think that is pretty worthwhile alone keeping Ice Beam over Draco, considering it has about 50% usage right now. And also for other dragons even, you could still click Ice Beam against stuff like Garchomp. And with this spread, you should be able to do a ton of damage to Garchomp, albeit the only set that would really take this hit would be a Tank Chomp with like a really high amount of HP. But even still, Garchomp doesn't OHKO you back with that sort of spread, so you're pretty fine. With the 240 HP and 76 Fizz Def, this is evident after Rocks, you can guarantee take a hit from a Life Orb Kartana, which is great, because with the Gooey hit, it'll actually, with the 64 speed, you should be able to comfortably outpace Kartana at that point, which in my opinion is, well, actually, no, never mind, hold on, I'm thinking of something, no, never mind, you can't with the Gooey, but you definitely can still get off a really good hit on Kartana with Flamethrower. So while you couldn't really switch this in and try and make off Gooey, unless if, let's say, your opponent clicks like a Sacred Sword on a Smart Strike or a Leaf Blade there, you can definitely still make this Pokemon in a 1v1 scenario trade, at least for Kartana, which, to be fair, you should most likely be playing this against special attackers, though it is still a nice option, especially if you pair this with a Wish user, because at that point then this Goodra might be around for more of a long game there. In terms of our next set though, this is my personal favorite. We have the Life Orb Sap Sipper set with Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Steel Beam, and Flamethrower. With this set, you're yet again with the 64 speed Creeping Corviknight. I forgot to mention that in the last spread, but you're Creeping Corviknight with that, which I thought was pretty important so you don't take random body presses without at least getting off a Flamethrower or a Thunderbolt first. But the Steel Beam, again, it's really the same sort of coverage. This is going to be pretty common in every sort of set. Though, I will say at the very least, if you were to run this in BDSP, I would highly recommend taking that 64 that you have currently in your speed stat, and I would move that down for, I would move that down to 0, because you're really not going to actually need it for any sort of set that would end up being in BDSP, considering there's not really any Pokemon that are actually worth creeping in that metagame. Maybe at most 8 for Clef, but with that in mind though, what would you actually want to make for your HP investment? So I would go to 232 with Life Orb. This way then you're only taking 35 damage instead of 36. And then I would take your leftover investment, which at this point, even if you were to burn the 8, it should be 16. And if not, it should be 24. And put that into Fizz Def just because it's your lower defense stat. But with this sort of set and the coverage, you should be able to hit a lot of Pokemon for astronomical damage. Considering you have the Life Orb, and most cases you're going to be hitting for super effective, most Pokemon will actually pretty much struggle to switch it on this typing. With 110 special attack and Bolt Beam coverage plus Flamethrower and Steel Beam, I can't think of many Pokemon that actually switch on this, though I will say one of the most used Pokemon in both metagames, being Heatran, would be a really good Pokemon to switch in versus this. It's one of the only ones I could really think of though, but if you pair this with a good ground type, whether it's a Garchomp if you're playing in BDSP, or even let's say something like, for example, Hippowdon if you're playing BDSP, which in that case you could always go for Overcoat as well, or if you're playing in Sword and Shield, you could always go for something like a Lando T. Point is though, is you definitely have options to kill Heatran. It's not a Pokemon that's really some metagame breaking Pokemon. You definitely will have stuff to hit it for. And even still, you'll have enough special bulk to where you could probably at least take a single hit and get off a Thunderbolt, which I can't imagine does anything less than a quarter. Especially even, like, that's versus Spidef Heatran, mind you. I can't imagine it does less than a quarter, though I don't know the calc offhand. Finally though, I want to get into a Shuca Berry set. And the reason I suggest Shuca Berry is because whether you're playing this in BDSP or Sword and Shield, or even the next games, because I'm assuming the next games will have some sort of Lando T or some other top tier ground type, your fighting is one of the most highest tier Pokemon you're fighting would be a ground type. Whether it's Garchomp or Lando T, you're fighting some sort of demonic ground type. So I felt like that Shuca Berry in this case would be the best case. And with the 180 special attack, you should be able to comfortably take out any sort of ground type that you'd really need to play between those two, even if they are running more defensive spreads. That way then you can go for the Ice Beam here and take it out. The one exception that I will say is that sadly if Garchomp gets set up already, you obviously can't double this in on Garchomp. But if Garchomp is already at +2, you're not going to take the hit if it's a Life Orb set. Otherwise, you could take it on a roll at best. But I felt like that was still really important to maybe forego, considering Garchomp doesn't run a lot of Life Orb anyway at this point. So I thought there was something that I'd be willing to maybe forego on this sort of spread, especially when you're still going to be able to handle a majority of Garchomps at the very least, especially if they don't get set up beforehand, because typically what I would assume is they're probably going to try and come in and Earthquake you raw and then go for a Sword Dance and something else. But with the Shuca Berry set, you should be able to do that pretty fine and just KO it on the Earthquake turn, since you should only take about half, which is, in my opinion, really, really worthwhile, considering this is more meant to be a lure to those top tier Pokemon, and would actually give some nice, like, mild usage out of Goodra, in my opinion, in those upper tiers, especially in the early metas with the new transfer Pokemon, because that's typically when Pokemon like Goodra would truthfully run the most rampant, considering people are just trying to use it as quickly as possible before people figure out the best way to beat it. So if I had to pick, I think this would probably be the set that I think has the highest ceiling, at least in OU. I think that if you were to play Sword and Shield, Assault Vest is the safest set, truthfully. It's great at switching in on stuff like, for example, Coco, and also any sort of Fairy type is gonna get completely switched on, because despite being neutral, this still has a monstrous Spidef stat. Whereas if I was to be playing BDSP, I think I might lean for Shuca over Life Orb at least. But Life Orb is still a really good option, especially if you were to bring this Pokemon in Trick Room. But it's still a good option either way. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did and you learned something new today or just had a good time, leave a like below. As I said, it is the easiest way to support the channel for free. If you want other ways to support the channel, obviously commenting down below what Pokemon you want to see next is a great one, because not only does it tell me what you guys want to see next, but it's also a great way to, get some interaction up and get some conversation between us. Subscribe if you don't want to miss a video like this, especially if you enjoyed the guides. And with that said, I would like to of course shout out my channel members who help support the channel monetarily, being Zeke Zero, Josh the Kid Ultra Player, Mia, Rika Hashizora, Randy Chappa, and Pokemon fan Magistic Xerneas. I appreciate your guys' support very much. It helps fund stuff, whether it's graphics or the videos, or just in general helps pay for the time that I put into these, so I genuinely do appreciate it. With that said, I will see you guys in the next video, which tomorrow's video will be another Road to Ranked off of Shadow Calyrex. So hopefully you guys enjoy that, and I will see you guys then. Peace out, guys.